Let's consider the term suffering. We might also consider it simply the pain and unease we experience during negative emotions. Sometimes we feel bad and we suffer without any apparent reason, but most of the times it is due to something that has occurred in our lives. We observe an event, a situation, whether that is a breakup, loss of career, loss of money, loss of a loved one, loss of health, loss and more loss. Suffering tends to occur when we consider the pain of a loss or things not working out the way we hoped they would. There's wisdom in understanding that in Buddhism, attachment is a cause of suffering. I was once told that the Buddha might have also said that life itself is suffering. From this we can come to the conclusion that simply being alive means we will be confronted by events that will make us suffer to a certain extent. There's nothing wrong with suffering, but it could be useful to figure out better ways of dealing with suffering. First, I would like to suggest that finding peace through acceptance of circumstances is the fastest way to overcome suffering. To know and accept, yes, this may at first not make me feel good, but the event, sad as it may be, is part of life as we know it. Therefore, if I keep resisting it and somehow fight with these events, I will keep suffering in that act, because I will be unable to experience peace within my very being. If I am suffering, I am literally somewhere, somehow, inside my mind, resisting the event or thing in question. You will be able to trace a certain form of negativity inside your mind that is in correspondence to the event. What would happen if I were to let go of this inner tendency? Am I saying we should accept everything that happens to us, no matter how bad it is? Yes and no. I'm not saying that when something bad happens to you, that you should feel good about it. It is perfectly fine to feel upset over it. That is just life. Things happen to us all the time we do not like, but we ultimately have to find a way to accept what has happened, so that we can make peace with it, because it is in that act of making peace that your suffering concerning the event will end. Suffering is again resisting something that is occurring or has happened to us. In other words, it is actively generating and entertaining negative thoughts and feelings concerning events that we observe or are going through. Where does attachment come into the picture? We can and tend to be attached to many things in life, but more subtly, we tend to be attached to either our positive or negative emotions. In Buddhism, attachment is known as a cause for suffering, so that indicates that non-attachment would be the key to peace. With non-attachment, we don't mean withdrawing from life or events entirely. We mean going along with the flow of life itself. Good times, bad times, we cannot escape them. What we can do is find a strong inner balance when dealing with these events as they come along. The balance we talk about is no longer letting your inner peace be disturbed by outer events. Whether they are good or bad doesn't even matter. It is possible to experience deep inner peace and well-being regardless of what occurs to us physically speaking. Now, most people do not know about this. When we hear about it, we might agree that something like that might be possible. But overall, we tend to let good events and bad events take us in all kinds of directions, which is direct cause for us losing this sense of inner peace and well-being. Hence, we sooner or later start to suffer. I've lost people, some in very tragic ways. I can say from personal experience that yes, I did suffer, sometimes worse than other times, but in all of it I have found that it was due to me resisting the event in question. I found more peace in accepting that life itself is complex, and the way we have been raised, generally speaking, is to react and resist anything and everything that happens to us. The reason we keep doing it is due to the ego. It's desperate to protect itself and afraid of having its own sense of self be disturbed. But there is no ego. It was not the real you. It was a temporary illusion taken upon by the infinite awareness that lies behind it. If all is God and nothing but God, we are saying all comes from and exists in the same universal substance of all life. Therefore, the suffering we experience, usually over loss of some kind, is an illusion in a way. An illusion that feels very real for the purpose of experiencing this thing called life as a separate human being, surrounded by an infinitely large universe. By clearly understanding who you really are, that being that you are that experiences the suffering in question, you learn to overcome your suffering, for they are nothing but an experience you are going through. They are no way actually affecting the real nature of who you are. It is our belief in the ego, separate self, that causes us to suffer greatly, for from that point of view, we must resist and fight against many things that of their own are also a temporary illusion in a way. Again, the illusion doesn't mean it's not real. We do experience the pain of it. But when we say illusion, we mean the innate fear we have that we will suffer forever, as long as we do not resist the events that occur. But the silly part is that in resisting lies the real reason for suffering. Could you accept your circumstances just the way they are? For in doing so, inner peace and well-being can occur, and from that place of beingness, it obviously becomes easier to make positive improvements in your life. That is what we are getting at. To become aware of this process so we can consciously work with it. In some cases, I have personally experienced this to happen. Sometimes things have been so overwhelming, I just couldn't do anything but let go and let God. I had no other things to do than to completely give myself over to God and accept whatever happened to me to be just fine. To the ego, it sounds absurd at first, but in that act, it was like a gateway inside my consciousness opened up, and a flow of unconditional love came over my entire being. It instantly let me experience peace and inner well-being, and I knew everything will be alright. The moment I start resisting events, things, or people, again, the peace and inner well-being will vanish, and I feel bad again. Going back and forth between this process, I've come to the conclusion that acceptance is the way to overcome suffering effectively. But again, we are not saying we wouldn't initially have a reason or cause to feel bad about something. We simply learn to understand that we won't escape our suffering as long as we stay in conflict about it in our minds. We learn to accept our suffering even if the event or person has been unacceptable at first glance. We accept it for ourselves so we can, from a place of inner well-being and peace, become aware of a better way to go about the situation and or outgrow it entirely. That is the beauty of this attitude. So how can you learn to accept the situation that is causing you so much suffering? You learn it by experimenting with this process. First, see if you can honestly answer that your suffering will be eternal. The thing that is causing you to feel bad, is it really something that will be with you forever? Or is peace and well-being your true eternal nature? By considering these questions, you are opening up your mind further into the truth of who you really are. Because by understanding that you are not your name, ego, or body, then you realize nobody can literally ever touch or hurt the real you. No event can actually disturb the real being that you are. But due to your belief in a separate egoic self, you are absolutely vulnerable from that point of view. Who is the one that is suffering? Have you ever asked yourself that? Well, you would say, I am suffering. But who or what is the nature of it? Contemplate it. You will notice the being that you are is saying, I am suffering because this or that happened. But that same being that you are can also say, I am free, because it is ultimately a state of awareness that is simply experiencing thoughts and feelings that can cause us suffering, It is your own awareness of being you need to focus upon in order to come to the realization that your suffering is due to the attachment to a certain event, be it good or bad. And in that attachment you can never find peace, because all things come and go. What is the use of desperately holding on to something when they were never meant to be held on to? What all of us are meant to discover is the nature of our own awareness and see what we can do with it. We can do lovely things with this wisdom, or we can use our awareness of being to focus on all the negatives. Usually we simply go back and forth between positive and negative. There is no stable foundation from which we experience these two aspects of life. But we could experience a stable foundation by simply first discovering that pure awareness is what we are. Awareness itself doesn't have a negative or positive state, it just is aware. But then we start adding labels to it that cause us suffering and conflicts throughout our lifetime. Know that you are a point of awareness, and that everything else is just added onto that. That means even your suffering is something that is placed on top of that peaceful awareness that you really are. Awareness simply is aware, and it therefore also simply aware of the supposed good or bad during our physical journey. But from awareness we came into being, and to awareness we shall return. Knowing this truth, literally feeling the truth about yourself throughout your entire being, can bring you the peace you seek. It is the way to end your suffering.